She claimed it was self-defense. The courtroom went silent until the video started playing. What the judge saw next would change everything. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe for more true courtroom stories like this. 1. Where justice speaks louder than excuses. Now let's begin. The defendant, Melissa Crane, sat straight in her chair, her eyes darting around the courtroom like a trapped animal searching for an exit. For weeks she had painted herself as the victim, a woman forced to defend her life against an abusive ex-boyfriend. Her story was compelling, emotional, and for a while believable. Even the jury had shown sympathy. She spoke with trembling hands, her voice cracking as she described that night. "He came at me. I had no choice," she whispered, tears rolling down her face. The defense attorney nodded, letting the silence stretch, just long enough for the jurors to imagine the fear she described. But in the front row, the victim's mother never blinked. Her eyes, cold and unwavering, told another story. The prosecution waited patiently for their moment. When it finally came, the tone of the room shifted like a storm rolling in. The prosecutor walked toward the judge's bench with a quiet confidence. "Your Honor," he said, holding up a USB drive, "the defense claims this was self-defense. But this is what really happened." The lights dimmed. The screen flickered. A video began to play, grainy but clear enough. The jurors leaned forward as the scene unfolded in real time. It wasn't Melissa being attacked. It was her following him. Her voice could be heard off camera, angry, mocking. Nothing like the frightened victim she'd pretended to be. A single gasp escaped from the audience, then another. The defense attorney's hand froze mid-air, his expression turning pale. Melissa's head dropped, her face drained of color. The video ended, leaving only silence. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Crane," he said, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Do you have anything to say for yourself before we continue?" Her lips quivered, but no words came out. The illusion of innocence was gone, and in its place stood the raw truth. The jury wasn't looking at a victim anymore. They were looking at a liar who thought she could outsmart the system. The prosecutor didn't rush. He let the silence hang in the air, long enough for the weight of that video to settle over everyone. Then he turned to the jury and spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw was not fear. That was fury. That was control." His voice grew steadier, sharper. Melissa Crane didn't fight for her life. She hunted for revenge. The words echoed through the courtroom. Melissa's breathing quickened. Her attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but she didn't respond. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, as if looking anywhere else might make the truth disappear. The prosecutor walked closer to the defense table and held up a printed frame from the video. Melissa standing over the victim, phone in hand, recording him as he begged her to stop. She said she was terrified, he continued, yet she had the presence of mind to film her own crime. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Even the bailiff's expression shifted from neutrality to quiet disbelief. The judge tapped his gavel once, calling for order. But it was too late. The illusion of innocence had shattered. The jury's eyes told the whole story. Some looked furious, others just sad. The prosecutor turned back to his desk, clicked another video file and said, "This one has sound." The room held its breath again. The recording began, Melissa's voice, venomous and cold. "You thought you could ruin me? Now it's your turn to be scared." The victim's voice was weak, pleading, "Please, Melissa, don't." The sound filled every corner of the courtroom. Melissa squeezed her hands together, her knuckles turning white. Her attorney stood, trying to object, but the judge raised his hand. "Overruled," he said. "Let the evidence speak for itself." When the clip ended, no one spoke. The prosecutor faced the jury one last time. "Self-defense?" he asked softly. "Or something else entirely?" He walked back to his seat without looking at her again. The damage was done. The truth was no longer in question, it was undeniable. Melissa knew it. Everyone did. But what came next would determine how far her lies would take her down. The judge leaned back, studying Melissa for a long, quiet moment. "Ms. Crane," he said finally, "you've had your chance to speak through your lawyer, but I think it's time we heard from you directly." The courtroom waited. Melissa didn't move at first. Her hands trembled slightly as she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," she began. He was the one who started it. He wouldn't stop following me. Her tone was softer now, almost childlike, as if she hoped pity might still find her. The judge's gaze didn't waver. And yet, the footage shows you following him, he said. So which version of this story should we believe? Melissa's lip quivered. I panicked, she said. I wasn't thinking clearly. The prosecutor stood. Then how do you explain this? He held up a printed message, an email recovered from Melissa's account. The subject line read, "He won't ruin me again." You sent this 12 hours before the incident, the prosecutor said. You wrote, and I quote, "I'll make him regret ever crossing me." The jury stirred, their faces tightening. Melissa looked stunned. That wasn't about him, she blurted. That was about my boss. Your boss? The prosecutor asked, voice low, controlled. The one who gave you a promotion that same day? Her mouth opened, then closed again. The silence was deafening. The judge tilted his head. Ms. Crane, lying won't help you now. If you want this court to believe anything, start with the truth. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they looked different. Not grief, not guilt, just fear. She stared at the jury, searching for sympathy that no longer existed. You don't understand, she whispered. He wasn't supposed to die. The prosecutor looked at her, his tone measured. You're right, Ms. Crane, but that's what happens when people think they can rewrite the truth. Her tears fell freely now. But even as she cried, the room stayed still. No one comforted her. The truth had done what justice was meant to do. It stripped away. Everything fake until only the reality remained. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. News outlets had already picked up the story, calling it the self-defense that wasn't. Cameras flashed as Melissa was led inside, her wrists trembling under the weight of the moment. The prosecutor walked in last, holding a sealed envelope. His expression was calm, but there was something final in his stride. Your Honor, he began, before we rest our case, there's one last piece of evidence. The judge nodded. Proceed. The prosecutor handed the bailiff a folder. Inside were printed screenshots of messages sent from Melissa's phone the night before the incident. He displayed them on the projector. The first message read, "He thinks I'm weak." The next one, "Tomorrow, I'll show him who's really scared." The room went still. These were sent to a contact saved as AL, the prosecutor continued. When investigators traced the number, it belonged to a former co-worker, Angela Lewis. We interviewed her last night. The courtroom shifted uneasily. Ms. Lewis confirmed that Melissa called her just after midnight, saying she was finally going to fix everything. The defense attorney stood, panic in his voice. Objection. There's no proof she meant violence. Overruled, the judge interrupted. The jury will decide that. The prosecutor turned to the jurors. Ladies and gentlemen, Melissa Crane wasn't defending herself. She was executing a plan. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. And when that plan went too far, she tried to rewrite it as fear. Melissa's face turned pale. She shook her head furiously. That's not true. She's lying. Angela hated me. But the damage was done. The jury had seen too much, heard too much. Even the judge's tone softened, not out of pity, but finality. Ms. Crane, he said, truth isn't something you can edit after the fact. She slumped into her chair, the tears gone, replaced by quiet resignation. Somewhere in the back, a reporter whispered, That's it. It's over. But for Melissa, it wasn't over. It was only the beginning of the end. The defense attorney rose, adjusting his glasses with a shaky hand. Your Honor, he said, my client would like to testify. A murmur swept through the courtroom. The judge hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Very well. Ms. Crane, take the stand. Melissa stood slowly, straightening her blazer as if trying to put her armor back on. The bailiff swore her in and she sat down, clutching the sides of the witness box. Her attorney leaned in. Melissa, he said gently, you've heard the evidence presented against you. But you maintain this was self-defense, correct? Yes, she said quickly. I didn't plan anything. I just wanted to protect myself. Her lawyer nodded encouragingly. Tell the court what really happened that night. She took a shaky breath. He came to my apartment angry. He yelled. He threw things. He said he'd ruin me if I ever left him. I was terrified. A few jurors glanced at one another, uncertain. For a moment, her story seemed believable again. But the prosecutor rose almost immediately. "Ms. Crane," he said calmly, "you testified that the victim came to your apartment. But according to the building's security footage, you entered his building 30 minutes before he arrived." Melissa froze. "I just wanted to talk to him," she stammered. "About what?" The prosecutor pressed. "About ending things," she said. "Then why did you disable his security camera before he came home?" The room erupted in whispers. Melissa's lawyer stood to object, but she cut him off. "I didn't," she shouted. The prosecutor stepped closer. "The technician traced the system log to your phone. You turned it off at 8:42 p.m. That's the same minute you sent a message saying, 'He'll never see it coming.'" Melissa's lips trembled. "That was a joke," she whispered. The prosecutor nodded slowly. "Then tell us, Ms. Crane, who was laughing?" She looked down, silent. The weight of the truth pressed harder than any sentence the court could deliver. For the first time, she didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just stared ahead, realizing the performance was finally over. The courtroom lights dimmed again as the prosecutor approached the bench with a small flash drive in his hand. "Your Honor," he said, "this is the final piece of evidence. It contains the audio recorded by the victim's home security system, the part Ms. Crane believed she had. Deleted." A chill rippled through the room. The judge nodded. "Play it." The projector screen flickered to life. At first there was only static. Then a door creaked open. Footsteps echoed, 2 sets. A man's voice, tired but calm. "Melissa, you shouldn't be here." Then hers, colder than before. "You don't get to decide that." A pause. Glass clinked. He sighed. "You said it was over." "It is," she replied. Her voice lowering, trembling with rage. "Just not for me." The sound of movement followed. A scuffle, a heavy thud, and then silence. The room froze. Every juror stared at the screen as the audio continued. A single phrase, whispered through clenched teeth. "No one leaves me." The clip ended abruptly. The silence afterward was suffocating. Even the defense attorney didn't move. Melissa's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't for sympathy, they were for herself. She finally understood that the lie she had built had become her own cage. The prosecutor broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly. That was the truth in her own voice. He turned toward Melissa. "Self-defense doesn't sound like that, does it?" The judge leaned forward, her voice steady. "Ms. Crane, do you wish to respond before I address the jury?" Melissa shook her head, her voice barely audible. "No." The judge looked to the jury box. "You have everything you need," she said. "We'll reconvene tomorrow for your verdict." As the courtroom emptied, Melissa sat motionless, staring at the floor. For the first time, she didn't seem angry, just lost. Somewhere deep down, she knew there was no escaping what came next. The following morning, the air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. Jurors filed in, their faces tight and expressionless. Melissa sat at the defense table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. But the calm she tried to project couldn't hide the tremor in her fingers. The judge called the room to order, but before the jury could be addressed, the prosecutor stood. "Your Honor," he said, "before deliberations begin, the prosecution requests to introduce one final document. It pertains to the defendant's prior conduct, specifically a restraining order filed 2 years ago by another man." Ripple of whispers swept through the room. The judge raised a brow. "Proceed." The prosecutor handed the folder to the bailiff, who brought it to the bench. "This," he said, "is a sworn affidavit from a man named Andrew Keller. He describes a pattern of manipulation, threats, and staged self-harm intended to control him. The details are almost identical to what we've seen here." The defense attorney jumped to his feet. "Objection! That's character evidence not relevant to this case." The judge paused, then said quietly, "Overruled. The jury will take it under advisement." The prosecutor turned toward the jury, his tone measured but firm. "This isn't about coincidence. It's about intent." Miss Crane didn't snap in a moment of fear. She followed a pattern of control. He placed the file on the table in front of Melissa. She didn't defend herself that night. She defended her pride. Melissa's jaw tightened. Her attorney leaned in, whispering for her to stay silent. But she couldn't. "He was lying," she said suddenly. Andrew, he made all that up. The prosecutor looked at her, voice calm but piercing. Then tell us, Ms. Crane, why did you send him the same message you sent the victim? The one that said, "You'll never walk away from me." The room froze. The jury stared. Melissa opened her mouth to speak, but stopped halfway, her voice cracking. I didn't mean it, the prosecutor nodded slowly. No, Ms. Crane, you never do until it's too late. The judge's gavel struck once. The jury will now deliberate. As they stood to leave, Melissa lowered her head, whispering something to herself no one could quite hear. It wasn't supposed to happen twice. The courtroom doors creaked open just as the jury was preparing to exit. A man in his late 30s stepped forward, escorted by a bailiff. His suit was wrinkled, his face pale, but his eyes burned with quiet conviction. The judge looked up, surprised. Sir, this is a closed session. The bailiff handed her a document. Your Honor, this man has been granted permission to speak. He's Andrew Keller, the individual mentioned. In the new evidence, a murmur spread through the gallery. Melissa froze. Her hands gripped the edge of the defense table until her knuckles turned white. The judge glanced at her, then back at Andrew. Mr. Keller, you understand this is highly irregular. I do, he said. But it's necessary. The judge hesitated, then nodded. You may proceed, but keep it brief. Andrew stepped forward, his voice steady but soft. 2 years ago, I thought I was going crazy. Melissa made me question everything. My memory, my sanity, even my worth. When I tried to leave, she told me she'd destroy me. And she almost did. He looked toward her. And for the first time, Melissa couldn't meet his gaze. I came here today, Andrew continued, not for revenge, but because I heard her say the same things I once heard. I needed this jury to know. She's done this before. And she'll do it again if she ever gets the chance. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fans. The judge studied Melissa carefully. Ms. Crane, do you have any response to this testimony? Melissa's voice cracked. He's lying, she whispered. He wants to ruin me. No, Andrew replied quietly. You already did that yourself. His words hit harder than any sentence could. The judge finally dismissed him, thanking him for his courage. As he left the stand, the jury didn't look at Melissa anymore. They looked through her. Because now it wasn't about whether she'd acted in fear. It was about how many times she'd hidden behind that same lie. When the jury returned to the courtroom, everyone stood. The foreperson held the sealed verdict in trembling hands, ready to deliver it. But before he could speak, Melissa stood abruptly. Wait, she said, her voice sharp and desperate. The judge frowned. Ms. Crane, sit down. No, she said, shaking her head. If I don't say this now, no one will ever understand. The judge exhaled slowly. Proceed, but understand that anything you say may be used against you, Melissa took a shaky breath, her words spilling out like a dam breaking. You all think you know what happened. You think I planned this, that I wanted him dead. But I didn't. I just wanted him to feel what I felt. She turned toward the jury, her voice rising. Do you know what it's like to be made small? To be ignored? He made me feel invisible, her lawyer whispered. Stop talking. But she didn't. I tried to talk to him, but he laughed at me. He said I was pathetic. So yes, I followed him. I wanted him to listen for once in his life. But I didn't mean to kill him. Her tone softened, breaking into a whisper. I didn't mean to... The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even the prosecutor didn't move. The judge finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. Ms. Crane, that sounds a lot like an admission. Melissa laughed bitterly. Call it whatever you want. I call it the truth. She sank back into her seat, her breathing ragged. For a moment, the courtroom seemed to freeze in time, until the judge gave a small nod to the foreperson. Please continue. The foreperson cleared his throat, unfolding the verdict slip. In the case of the state versus Melissa Crane. He paused, his voice steady. We find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. Gasps filled the room. Melissa closed her eyes, her face a strange mix of shock and relief. It was as if the weight she had carried had finally fallen away, even as her fate was sealed. The judge struck the gavel once. The court will reconvene tomorrow for sentencing, as the bailiff escorted her out. She glanced back only once, at the jury, at Andrew, at the empty chair where the victim's mother sat crying softly. For the first time, there was no act left to play. Only the truth she could no longer escape. The next day, the courtroom was filled to capacity. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists whispered into microphones. And the entire nation waited to hear what sentence the judge would deliver. Melissa Crane entered wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, her wrists cuffed. Gone was the confident posture from her earlier testimony. She looked smaller now, fragile, almost ghost-like. The judge entered, gavel striking once. "Court is in session," she announced. The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, the state recommends a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The defendant's actions were deliberate, manipulative and void of remorse." He sat down, expression unreadable. The judge nodded, then turned toward Melissa. "Ms. Crane, before I render judgment, do you have anything you wish to say?" The room fell silent. Melissa stood, hands shaking as she faced the court. "No one believes me," she said quietly. "No one ever has. I'm not a monster, I just wanted to be seen." Her voice cracked. "Every time someone leaves, I disappear a little more. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I can't fix what I've done. But I didn't wake up that morning planning to kill him." Her lawyer looked down. Even he couldn't defend her anymore. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Crane, I don't doubt you felt pain. But pain doesn't give you the right to cause it." She paused, her voice steady but full of weight. "You didn't just take a life. You destroyed trust, the kind that holds this entire system together." The courtroom was silent as she continued. "For that, this court sentences you to life in prison, with eligibility for parole after 25 years. Melissa closed her eyes. The gavel struck once. It was over. As guards moved to escort her out, the judge spoke one final time. "I hope one day you understand that truth isn't what you say to others, it's what you finally admit to yourself." Melissa turned her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Maybe," she whispered, "but sometimes the truth comes too late." The doors closed behind her, and with that sound, the courtroom finally exhaled. The story of Melissa Crane had ended, not with justice alone, but with a haunting reminder that some lies never really die. Hours after the sentencing, the courthouse emptied. The reporters were gone, the cameras packed up, and the world had already moved on to the next story. But in a quiet evidence room 2 floors below, Detective Marlowe sat under flickering fluorescent light, staring at the case file that refused to let him go. Everything was over, or at least it should have been. Yet something about Melissa Crane's words from earlier echoed in his mind. Sometimes, the truth comes too late. He opened the folder again, flipping through photos, transcripts, and forensic reports. Then he saw it. Something he hadn't noticed before. A timestamp. The security camera footage, used in court, had a 6-minute gap before the confrontation began. He frowned. 6 minutes, he muttered. "Where were you, Melissa?" He double-checked the lab's log. The file had been recovered from a corrupted drive at the victim's apartment, transferred by a technician, but the technician's signature was missing. He picked up the phone and called the digital forensics unit. "I need the name of the analyst who handled the Crane case," he said. The voice on the other end hesitated. "Detective, that's strange." "There's no record of anyone logging that recovery." Marlowe's pulse quickened. "That's impossible." "Maybe not," the tech said quietly. "There's a second copy. It was uploaded to the system an hour after the original was submitted. Different hash, same file name." Marlowe stood up, heart pounding. Someone had tampered with the evidence. He pulled on his coat, heading toward the archives. The hallways were dark, the echo of his footsteps following him like a warning. He opened the secure drawer marked Crane Case and found what he was looking for. 2 drives, identical labels, but only one had an original forensic seal. The other had been opened and resealed. A chill ran through him. "Who touched this?" he whispered. Then he saw the initials etched faintly into the metal. A.L. Angela Lewis, the friend who had testified against Melissa. The one who had received those late-night messages. The one no one had questioned. Detective Marlowe arrived at the small suburban house just past midnight. The porch light flickered, and a single window glowed faintly behind thin curtains. Angela Lewis lived alone. She'd cooperated during the trial, testified calmly, even cried when Melissa was sentenced. But something about her story had always felt too perfect. He knocked once, then twice, no answer. "Ms. Lewis, it's Detective Marlowe," he called out. After a pause, the door opened a few inches, Angela stood there in a robe, her hair messy, eyes wide. "Detective? It's late. What is this about?" "Just a few questions," Marlowe said evenly. "About the Crane case." Her expression shifted, just for a moment. "I already told the court everything I know. Then you won't mind clearing something." "Up!" He stepped inside, glancing around. The house was spotless, too spotless. No photos, no clutter, no trace of normal life. "You handled some digital files for Melissa, didn't you?" The night of the incident, she stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marlowe placed a flash drive on the table. "This was recovered from the evidence room. It has your initials on it." Angela's breath hitched. "That's impossible." "I don't believe in impossible," Marlowe said quietly. "Just unanswered." She crossed her arms, forcing a weak smile. "You think I helped her?" "I think you knew more than you said." He leaned forward, his tone hardening. "Why did you alter the footage?" She froze. "I didn't alter anything." "Then why did you upload a duplicate file an hour after the original was submitted?" Her face paled. "You don't understand. She made me do it. She said she'd ruin me if I didn't help." "Melissa?" "Yes!" Angela shouted. She wasn't just obsessed with him, she was obsessed with control. She said if I didn't cover that part of the video, she'd tell everyone what I did. Marlowe's brow furrowed. "What you did?" Angela's eyes filled with tears. "She wasn't alone that night, Detective. I was there." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. "She called me after it happened. Told me to help her clean up. Before the police arrived." "Why? Didn't you come forward?" Marlowe demanded. "Because she said she recorded me too," Angela whispered. "If I talked, she'd make sure I took the fall with her." Detective Marlowe sat back in his chair, stunned by Angela's confession. She was shaking now, her voice barely audible. "She said she'd ruin me," she repeated, "and I believed her. I didn't know what she was capable of." Marlowe stared at her for a long moment, then opened his recorder. "Angela, I need you to tell me everything." "From the start," she nodded weakly. "She called me right after it happened. Said she needed help. I got there and Daniel was already gone. She was panicking, crying. Then she looked at me and said, 'If you help me fix this, we'll both be fine.' I didn't understand what she meant until later. She made me help move things, hide things. She even made me delete the first few minutes of the footage." Marlowe's eyes narrowed. "Why those minutes?" Angela hesitated, tears filling her eyes. "Because someone else was there before me." The detective leaned forward. "Who?" "I don't know his name," she whispered. "He came with her once before. A man she said was helping her collect evidence. But that night, he was angry," they argued. "I heard him shout that he wasn't taking the blame for this. When I asked her about him later, she said he was gone, that he moved away." Marlowe frowned. "Gone where?" Angela shook her head. "She didn't say. But before she was arrested, she told me something strange." "What?" he pressed. "She said, if they ever find the real tape, they'll know it wasn't just me." Marlowe's heartbeat quickened. "The real tape?" Angela nodded. "She made me swap the files, remember? There were 2 cameras in that apartment, one in the living room and one hidden behind a photo frame near the stairs. I only erased one." Marlowe stood abruptly. "Where's the other?" Angela swallowed hard. "It's still there, Detective." "Unless someone's already found it." The room went cold. Marlowe grabbed his coat. "You just bought yourself a second chance, Angela. If that tape still exists, it's the key to everything." He walked toward the door, the weight of the revelation pressing down like thunder. Behind him, Angela's voice trembled. "Detective, if you find that tape, don't watch it alone." Detective Marlowe arrived at the old apartment, just as dawn painted the sky in pale gray. The place had been sealed for months, dust gathering like the world's attempt to forget. But truth never stays buried. He cut the police tape and stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with silence and something else, anticipation. His flashlight swept across overturned furniture and the faint outline of where the crime scene markers once stood. He moved to the stairs, his eyes locking on the framed photograph Angela had mentioned. The glass was cracked, and behind it, a tiny lens glinted. "Got you," he whispered. Pulling out his tools, he removed the frame carefully. Behind it, a small camera was wedged into the wall, battery long dead. He pocketed the device and drove straight to the forensics lab. An hour later, the video flickered to life. The time code matched the night of the incident. Melissa appeared on screen, pacing, trembling. Then another figure entered, a man, tall, wearing gloves. His voice was distorted but familiar. "You can't fix this," he said coldly. "You've gone too far," Melissa's voice cracked. "Please, just help me." "He wasn't supposed to—" "Quiet," the man hissed. "You told me this would be clean." Marlowe froze. The voice, and he knew it. It belonged to Chief Prosecutor Ryan Dale, the man who'd led the case against Melissa, the one who'd insisted she acted alone. The footage continued. Melissa backing away, fear in her eyes. "If you ruin me, I'll ruin you," she screamed. The screen cut to black. Marlowe's blood ran cold. The prosecutor had been there. He'd buried evidence, pinned the blame, and built his reputation on a lie. Marlowe copied the file and stared at the screen, torn between duty and fear. If he exposed this, his entire department would fall. If he didn't, justice would die in silence. He took a deep breath and whispered, "The truth always has a price." Detective Marlowe closed the laptop slowly, the weight of the truth pressing heavier than the night itself. The city outside was waking up, but inside that dimly lit office, justice had just begun to breathe again. He took the evidence drive, sealed it in an envelope, and looked at the words he'd scribbled on the front. For those who still believe in truth. Some stories end in handcuffs, others in silence. But this one would end in light. He walked toward the courthouse, the sun breaking over the skyline, knowing that his next step could destroy everything, or finally set it right. The truth wasn't just a verdict. It was a burden. And today he chose to carry it.